Hello, Theater Horizon friends and family. I am Sara Gafgen. Nice to meet you. I am a teaching artist for Theater Horizon and have been for about 5 years now. I teach drama clubs as well as summer camps for Theater Horizon. So today I'm talking to you a little bit about the practical side of costuming. Now, I came to theater primarily as an actor. I have also worked as a stage manager, a director, and I worked in the costume shop the whole time I was in college. So, I found myself working on a lot of projects in a lot of different capacities. But as an actor and a stage manager and as a stagehand backstage, I have often found myself having to do some costume repairs. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Uh, Imagine that you're wearing the same outfit every day for 8 weeks. It's bound to meet with a little bit of trouble. Maybe there's a tear that needs to be fixed. Maybe a button falls off. These are really simple, basic repairs. Now, you may have been sitting around your house for the last 9 days or so. It may start to feel like a million, but you might have a shirt that lost a button, or maybe you have a favorite pair of pants that have a split on a seam. Well, guess what? You don't have to get rid of those items of clothing. You can fix them yourself. It's really not that hard. It doesn't take too much in terms of supplies. All you really need is a needle, some thread, a pair of scissors, and whatever item is broken. Now, if you've lost your button, you will need to buy a button, but fun fact, a lot of clothes come with a spare button sewn inside. So if you want to check inside your shirts, a lot of times on that inside seam, you'll find a spare button in there so that you can replace the button that fell off. So it really isn't hard. It doesn't take too long. And so we're going to take some time together today to make some really simple repairs. You guys excited? Great. All right, so our first repair that we're going to be making is putting a button back on this coat. I have my button, which fell off. I found it, so I know where it is. I have thread that matches the coat, and I have a needle. Now, threading needles can be hard, and so I did already thread this needle. There are no super special tricks for how to thread a needle more quickly necessarily, but I will say if you use really sharp fabric only scissors and cut your thread before you try to thread your needle, make sure it's not all fringy, you can do a little bit better job threading your needle a little more quickly. Now this is a 4-hole button, but you can see how it has those 2 lines in it. That means that instead of sewing a crisscross pattern as I normally would on a 4-hole button, I'm going to sew in that pattern of the indents on the button. So I have my coat and I can feel for where the bump or the rise is where the button used to be, and that's how I know where to sew it on. Now if you can't find that, you might want to button your coat rather in a place that does have a button, and then match your button up with the buttonhole so that you know you're putting it in the right place. So I'm going to change the angle a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. All right, so I'm going to start by placing a little stitch where I want my button to go. Now you can either knot the bottom of your thread or not knot the bottom of your thread, but you want to just make sure that it's going to hold in place. Then you're going to pick your first hole of your button. Then you're going to go ahead and sew through your angle of your button. And you're going to do that probably, I would recommend, between 5 and 6 times per side. Now, I am going all the way through this coat. I'm making sure that I sort of touch my finger with the tip of the needle and then push it back out as I go to put it through, up, over, and then stitching through the fabric on the bottom. Now I've lost count of how many times I've done, But I don't like to stop and cut the thread in between loops. It also weakens the thread. So I'm going to stitch through and then come up on the other side. There you go. Now you can see better. Stitch through and then go do the same thing on the other side. You're going to go sew through up and down about 5 or 6 times. Now, this is super fascinating, I know. But you're going to just keep doing that until you feel like your button is really nice and secure. Now, if you want to make sure that this looks nice and clean on the back, I'm not making a big wide stitch the whole length of the button. I'm just going a tiny, tiny little stitch, then coming back out through the other side so that I can go back in through that other hole. And make one more loop. Now, I feel like this is now pretty secure. Now, the trick to making sure that you have enough space for your button to actually button with your clothes, I like to wrap my thread around the button once I'm done. I'm wrapping it around about another 5 or 6 times. Then I do a couple of stitches through just to give it a little bit of stability. Just a couple. You can go one way then the other. Maybe you make a crisscross. Then I go around the back to finish it off by making, I like to finish by doing 1, 2, 3 little stitches. And then I go through a stitch. I like to take my thread and wrap my thread around the needle top 3 or 4 times, pull it through, and stitch a couple more little stitches. 1, 2, before I very simply grab my scissors and cut at the base of the fabric. So that is a freshly sewn button. You'll see it's nice and sturdy. I can pull on it and it's going to stay in place now. So we'll be back in a minute. All right, so we've made our first repair. Now, how many of you can think of an item of clothing in your closet that has a button that's fallen off and maybe you've been too afraid to sew it back on, but that whole thing took less than 5 minutes. So I hope that you'll now feel empowered to sew a button onto a piece of clothing. Now, another common thing that we deal with, especially in theater when people are wearing the same clothes multiple times and sometimes they're dancing or doing some extreme kind of movement, is we get tears. Now, this tear is pretty much on the pocket of these jeans, so I am going to stitch it up much in the same way that I would sew a hem or a seam that ripped. It's going to be really, really simple. You're going to turn your garment inside out to start because you want the majority of the sewing to be on the back side, this inside, because let's be honest, it's going to look cleaner, it's going to look nicer. So I have my garment here all ready. I have the space that needs to be repaired all fixed and folded and ready. So I'm going to move this so that you can get a better look. All right, so here we are again, and I have these jeans here. You can see I'm holding it with the right sides together and repairing the inside. So I have my needle threaded, and again I use a like colored thread, so this is actually that same dark navy blue. And I'm going to make 1 or 2, probably 2 or 3 stitches to start. I did not put a knot in it this time, so that's why it pulled through that first time. So what I'm doing is called a basic whip stitch. It's just going over and around. So all of this thread that's sticking out here, this is just kind of in our way. So I'm going to use my scissors and trim it up because there's no reason to sew that in. It'll just make the repair bulky. So my thread is now connected to my garment, and I'm going to very methodically, just about every, I'd say 1/16 of an inch, go through on the side closest to me to the side furthest away, and I'm just making a loop over and around, loop over and around. So go through the side close to you, go out the other side, pull it tight, and keep moving. Every, like I said, about 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch. With denim, it's not going to be super visible, but with a slightly more delicate fabric, you probably want things to be closer together, because not only will it hold more solidly, it will just look nicer in the end. So you're just going to keep looping and looping all the way up and down this seam that has ripped. And again, this is more for like if you have a hole or a tear, not necessarily if you're sewing a seam of a garment. But you're going to sew through. And as you can see, I did not get myself enough thread. So I have to finish this by doing a quick stitch through. This time I'll show you another option for tying off. I'm making a little loop here, putting my thread through and pulling it. I'm putting my needle through, making a quick loop, put my needle through, and pull it. And then I'm going to go ahead and rethread my needle, and I'm going to finish that repair. But as you can see, when you turn it around to the other side, you can see where that repair is, but it's barely even visible. Again, denim is super forgiving, so it's going to blend right in, and no one will ever know that there was a tear in these jeans, hopefully. All right, my friends, so while I finish up these jeans, now that you saw a good bit of that repair, I'm going to talk a little bit about why these kinds of repairs are helpful. So this repair that I'm doing that I showed you on these jeans, you can do that if your own pocket should rip. You can take your pocket, pull it out, and use these same small, close together whip stitches in order to put a seal on that hole so that you're not losing your money or your chapstick through your hole in your pocket. You can also use that to tack a seam until you can get it to a wardrobe person or to a machine. If you have a seam that rips, you can always just really quickly do a hand sewn repair. Now, of course, there were times when hand sewing was the only option because sewing machines didn't exist. So if you keep your stitches nice and tight and clean, close together, you'll be able to make your repairs strong enough that you could see that garment and that repair last just as long as sewing on a machine. So a lot of times people think sewing is intimidating or in some way, really complicated. And I just want you to walk away from this feeling empowered to go ahead and try to repair your own garments, because it really doesn't take that long. If you've got a basic hole or a basic tear or, again, a lost button, you really just want to make sure that you start off strong with nice materials. Make sure that you're giving yourself a good thread. There are different qualities of thread for hand sewing. I find that Highmark thread can be a little bit easier to use and can be a little bit stronger. But your basic thread that you can get, the dual duty all purpose thread, that's all great. You can use any of that. And just make sure that you do leave yourself enough room to tie off or knot off at the end. Because if your finishing is weak, then you're going to end up having to repair it again in a little bit. But again, now these jeans are totally fixed. You can't even see really where that tear was. And you can go back to wearing these jeans just like you have every other day, with no one being the wiser. So again, I hope that you feel excited and empowered to make those simple repairs. If you're an actor, being the kind of actor who can take a costume that has a very minor tear and fix it can be really useful, especially if you're working on a project where, again, your wardrobe person may be off handling a quick change. They may have to do laundry. And if you can take 2-3 minutes to make that repair, it can really make a difference in their day. It also can make a difference in your ability to get back on stage, because if you're waiting for them to finish a quick change and you have to be on stage in 3 minutes, well, you have time to really quickly fix that. So these are just a couple of basic repairs, again, that we see a lot on stage and you probably see a lot in your own closet. And so take the time to search through your closet while we're homebound and find those items of clothes that need some love. And it's all up to you. You've got the tools, you've got the power. Have fun. Great to meet you.